I wanted to start first picking up on what many of you mentioned, including Brian, which is network management practices. And let's talk a little bit about where is the line that you draw between reasonable and unreasonable network management practices, those that are required to protect users and the network, and those that might be used to discriminate for competitive purposes. What do you think are the key considerations in differentiating the reasonable from the unreasonable? Brian, why don't we go back to you, since you just were teeing it up?
Sure. I think from the perspective of net neutrality advocates really from the beginning, that the key distinction has been, is the network managed in a way that differentiates between the actual source or ownership of data versus types of data, and is the network managed in a way that is pretty clearly trying to protect potentially a non-internet service from internet competitors. That both of those kind of situations would be the types of things that we think from a net neutrality perspective would be problematic. And so in the Comcast BitTorrent situation, if the network is managed in a way to go after BitTorrent's data, as opposed to the sort of general types of services, and if it's done in a way in particular that does not allow their users to know, that would be a problematic kind of management. On the other hand, sort of general bandwidth caps and things like that would be essentially non-discriminatory and would actually be very consistent with the way the internet's operated from the beginning of the commercial internet, which is that all end users, whether individuals or small companies or large companies, at the end of the day, everybody paid more to get more bandwidth up on the network. And so, network management tools that operate in that fashion would be consistent with the internet as it's evolved, and we think would be very, pro-innovation and pro-net neutrality.
Dan, you seem like you wanted to make a response.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting, in law school they teach you bad facts make bad law, weird facts make interesting cases. This dispute, which Gigi mentioned and was just mentioned again, deals with the downloading of the King James Version of the Bible. Now, cable companies and Comcast in particular may be the beneficiaries of divine providence, but they do not dispense it. We do not actually have our own version of the Bible that only is available on Comcast on demand. It's pretty widely available. My guess is if you go upstairs to your hotel room, you might even find a complimentary copy by that competing cable company, Gideon. So it's of all cases to demonstrate, that we're somehow protecting one of our non-internet businesses and disadvantaging online businesses that compete. This was not, to me, the very best example I could think of. The other thing that to me is, and there are more facts of that case which make it a somewhat, as lawyers like to say, sui generis, what the AP reporter did in order to download. A lot of facts that go to that case. We don't have to debate it here in the process before the commission to review the facts and conclude what happened. But the other point I want to make is that during this year in which this complaint has been not the whole year, but while this complaint has been under review, Comcast in particular and other cable companies talking about it generally have reached out and made arrangements with BitTorrent to develop a system that is protocol agnostic in downloading large P2P files, which are, as was pointed out earlier by Chris, the largest user of the networks, these P2P files. Often machine to machine, no two people actually on the internet at the same time. And the other major development announced at the CES show is the development of wideband by the cable industry, which basically bonds 2 or 3 6 megahertz channels to create an enormous ability to upload and download traffic and content, particularly video. So at a time when the argument is, well, somehow the cable industry or other broadband providers are working to protect other non-internet businesses, at that very time we're engaged in a major highway construction project of unprecedented dimension on the internet to allow for greater large downloading and uploading capacity.
Gigi, you seem like you wanted to respond.
Yeah, the cable industry doesn't sell Bibles clearly, but they also have video services that can directly compete with peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer is mostly used to deliver video games, videos, movies, what have you, as well as other things. So, the notion you don't sell Bibles, clearly there's a competitive point, but that, you don't want to talk about the facts, but the facts are important. Because what Comcast was doing was it was deceiving its customers. It was sending forged reset packets and essentially cutting off communication between their customer and BitTorrent. So, I mean, the facts are not unimportant here. And they lied about it, and they continue to lie about it, and that's really problematic. They haven't been truthful.
But I do want to circle back to the
I
original question.
Yeah, can I just answer that? That's right. I just had to just touch on that Bible point. So here's where I think I would draw the line. I don't want the network provider to look at my data and make value judgments. Value judgments based on its source, on its destination, on its type. Okay, I don't want them looking at my communications and saying, because it's GG's, it goes here or it goes slower, or because it's a VoIP packet, it goes faster or slower. I don't want them making that judgment. I can make that judgment. And for me, and I think for public interest advocates, this debate is who has control. Does the network provider have control, or does the user have control? So, you know, if I want my E911 calls to go faster, or if I want my telehealth to go faster, that should be my choice, not the network provider's choice.
Mike, and I want to focus in on, rather than on a particular situation, more on the
right. The
network
question
management.
you asked is, I think, goes to the heart of the debate. How do you answer that question? What is reasonable network management, and who answers it, and then what do we do to regulate it? And the difficulty of answering the question at a time in which innovation is happening, investments are being made to increase capacity, points to the real problem behind this whole debate, which is if we have a statutory mandate that requires the FCC to step in and begin defining, so it won't be you, Gigi, it'll be the federal government. If we move to a system where the scheme is that the regulator has to define these things, all of us in this room are going to be marching down to the new Broadband Bureau at the FCC and litigating this for the next 3 to 5 years. And during that time, investment will stall. The very thing that we need to do to push broadband out faster to the consumer will be disincented and will, slow the crawl. And that's the problem.
Chris, you want to have the last word on this question?
Sure. From the wireless perspective, I think what gets lost here, and I know Gigi has a point specifically about Comcast, and I'm surprised to see that Comcast is not on this panel. Joking. From the wireless perspective, as we look at this, networks aren't managed to the benefit of the carriers. They're managed to the benefit of the expectations of the consumers. The networks are managed so that the consumer has the expectation that they want. I think what came out of the Cambridge hearing, and it was a little bit of a lost point, and I do understand that it's good to have the discussion about specifically singling out BitTorrent. We should have that discussion. But what Comcast representative on that panel said is that with regard to their service, if they didn't condition BitTorrent, then every consumer in that area would have had their service impacted, including the consumer that was using BitTorrent. And so the net result of what they did was they didn't cause any additional harm to the BitTorrent user than otherwise would have been caused if they had just taken their hands off the network. What they did is they conditioned the network so that others, and to me that's
so
what.
Tying this back to the original question.
And so that my point is, you don't know what reasonable is until you see it. It's the same thing. What is it? Justice Potter, talking about obscenity.
Right.
Okay, and it's going to evolve. I think that's Mike's point. It's going to evolve, and to set a hard and fast rule doesn't take into consideration that 3 years ago, maybe 1% of America. That's an unbelievably overbroad statement. Maybe 1/10% of America had a sense of what BitTorrent was.
Thanks.